your microphone? Because we're having some background noises. Fine. I've chucked everybody else today. Right, there we are. That's better. Let's just see who else is open. Yeah, but just click that the microphones are on. Well, we would like to welcome everybody to this the session we've planned, and I must say, 10 out of 10 for the people that were willing to speak. All of the speakers that are here today eagerly said yes when I asked them would speak. And so great. So I just welcome you all. I'm going to hand over to my chairman now. I just want to go through a few things. That number one, a recording has started. Now, what we do with these recordings, we put them on YouTube, and by Anneke says by Thursday, Friday, this recording will be on YouTube, and you then just type in the CEO top management or whatever, you'll pick it up there, and we can just check with Anneke later exactly what it is. So afterwards, you could share it maybe in meetings with your staff or your colleagues or even with clients. So that's just a bit of introduction. I don't want to take too much time. The one thing is that we just always, when we do something with ASPASA, we always just say that the agenda said that we're not colluding, because we're one of the few associations or bodies in the industry that have been investigated by SARS and the Competition Commission, and they can't find any point to nail us. So I know they've been looking at us, but we don't fall into that trap. We don't collude. If you feel we're colluding, then you put your hand up, you say so, it is recorded, and you leave the meeting. So I always make it very clear that that's one of the rules we stick to. And then just the normal Microsoft Teams rules, where we ask people to cut the mics and the video cameras, and we allow the speaker to be presented and able to talk. There is at the top of the little screen a little hand. If you want to talk, ask questions, please stick the hand up. If yours doesn't work, well, then put your mic on, and we normally see that. Sometimes these things work, sometimes they don't. But we're not going to be too strict. So that's enough from me. And thank you very, very much for all who joined. It's great that we have so many. I'm going to hand over. I think there's another one somewhere. Just check that your mic is because it's backfiring. Anneke, just cut the mics open. Right. I'm going to introduce my chairperson. His name is Gert Coffee. He sits in Cape Town, that place with a mountain, which I won't be rude about. And he's going to do a small talk. And Gert, thank you for doing it. Welcome and great. I hope it's still going well in Cape Town. Thank you, Gert. I'm going to cut out and be out. Okay.
Thank you, Nico. I must still get used to talking to a computer screen and pretend there are many people out there sitting listening to me. But let's go for it. Yes, and Cape Town, it's not a nice thing that's happening here, but last year it was the Free State, or the Free State's turn, so we all had our turn to have some bad disasters going. But welcome everybody for attending this workshop. And a special word of welcome and thank you to all the people who will deliver papers on subjects relevant to our industry. It is of great value to us, and it is much appreciated. Thank you. And also a big thank you to Nico and Paula and Anneke, the three ASPASA musketeers, for coming up with this idea and for organizing this for us. You know, we tend to all live in our own small world, and it is stuff like this, and it's workshops like this that give us the bigger picture and assist us in looking into the future and hopefully get a better idea of what is waiting for us. Now, I was wondering what the word association means, and I did what we all do. I went to Dr. Google and asked him, and of course there are many opinions and many different things and all that, but the golden thread running through it all is that an association is an organization of people with a common purpose and having a formal structure. Now we have a formal structure. It is called ASPASA, and it is well run, and but ASPASA doesn't have any executing, or an association doesn't have any executing powers. An association only has influencing powers. So ASPASA cannot go out and arrest illegal miners. But ASPASA can influence the South African police services to go out and close them down. If that doesn't work, they can go to the environmentalists, they can go to the DMR, they can go to the politicians. So it is a system of influencing, and Nico is very good with that, but it keeps him busy. You can imagine how and we all have experience of how difficult it is to do. So it is an association, what is the word? An organization of people with a common purpose. Now, if you look at the papers that will be delivered today, we are going to have inputs from the formal mining sector, and we will have inputs from the smaller mining sector. We will have people from the Coal Ash Association talking to us, the cement industry talking to us, the aggregates industry talking to us, all producers producing aggregates, lime, or whatever in some sort of, in other words, mining aggregates or products. We will also hear from our clients from the Construction Association, and then we will have some input from people that will assist us with certification, also very important. So Nico, I'm sure that people are not here to listen to me today, and thank you again for organizing this and coming up with this idea. It is great. And I would like to hand over to you again. Thank you, Nico.
Thanks, Gert. Great. Can you all hear me? I never checked on that. Some days I sit in Dahlstrom, so some days I can't be heard, which I think the industry often likes. But if you can all hear me, it's fine. Great. Right. Our first speaker is most probably one of the people I know that talk so easily. Roger is so easy in talking. Now, Roger Baxter is the CEO of the Minerals Council. And maybe for those who are not familiar with the mining industry, if we didn't have the Minerals Council, we would be lost. And I think last year, just before the lockdown, Gwere Mantashe said to us in a board meeting of the Minerals Council that he's fighting that the mining industry stays open and opens up as quick as possible, because that is the backbone of this country. So, so it's a very important thing, and that's why I asked Roger, and he's very clued up. I mean, there's nothing that goes on in mining that Roger doesn't know about. So, Roger, thanks for agreeing to come and talk to us. I couldn't have this thing if you weren't here, and I'm handing over to you. Thanks, Roger.
So, Nico, can you hear me then?
100%. Fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can you see the screen, Nico? Is it coming through clearly?
It's there, but it's small.
Okay, it shouldn't be. It should be massive. It's massive on my screen. Are the other colleagues seeing the presentation?
Perfectly, thank you.
Okay,
yes,
yes, thank you, Roger.
Okay, well, good. A very good morning to all of you. Thanks very much for taking the time to join the session today. And Nico, thanks very much for inviting us. And Gert, thanks also for your introductory comments. I think Nico knows me well enough by now. We've worked on many different issues, I guess, over the last nearly 30 years. And I guess he also knows that one of my new names is Frank. The minister calls me Frank, and I call the minister Candid. And it's quite a useful conversation because we actually don't beat around the bush. We tend to get focused on the real issues and get the real issues sorted out. So Nico, thanks. You asked me to do a quick presentation. You've given us 25 minutes to just give a quick update on the state of the mining nation of South Africa. I'm going to be very brief in some of the slides. You're obviously welcome to get a copy of the presentation and share that amongst your members. But let me just move straight into it. I think let's start off with the journey towards zero harm, and this just illustrates the journey that we're still on. Obviously, we saw a regression in 2020. The official numbers haven't been announced yet in terms of the number of fatalities in the sector by the minister, so we can't specify the estimated number just yet. And so far this year, we've had 17 fatalities versus 16 in the same period of last year. So again, another 15% regression from where we're at. And I think there's a number of different factors there, probably something related to the psychological impact of COVID on people and risk-taking, etc., etc. The second area, we don't start any meeting without dealing with health and safety. And the second area that we never start any meeting in the Minerals Council on is dealing with diversity and inclusivity in the sector. And all of you know that companies that have greater levels of diversity, particularly around the gender side, tend to be more adaptable, flexible, taking on new ideas, innovative. And that's what we need in this current environment, given the significant challenges that the sector's faced. So we have, as the Minerals Council, got a Women in Mining Leadership Forum. We have Nolita Fakodi and Neil Fronman as the two senior champions as office bearers. We have 6 priority initiatives in the Women in Mining strategy and 7 foundational measures. And again, Nico, this is an area that I'm sure you've been sharing with your members, where, you know, over time, we certainly targeting improving the level of gender diversity in the sector. Because we think it's the right thing to do. We're not tapping into 51% of the population of South Africa who are females. So then just going back into the health side, you know, we've had this COVID-19 pandemic hit us. I mean, who would have thought when we were sitting in February last year that we would have had a year that we've had in the sector? But unprecedented socioeconomic disruption. I guess the point is that no one had the answers. But one thing that's really critical is that the mining sector has really done itself proud in terms of the way that we collectively handled the pandemic, not only in terms of the way that we put in place our typical risk-based approach to managing particular issues, both preventative controls, mitigating controls, but also the way that we worked in partnership with other stakeholders on the issues. So just a few of the interventions. Again, there's a lot of detail here, but even by early January, the SARS-CoV-2 virus had been identified and renamed as COVID-19. By January, the World Health Organization had declared it as a public health emergency. By February, we had already initiated the circulation of guidance notes to members of how to deal with this type of pandemic. And obviously by 11th of March, we had WHO actually declaring it as a global pandemic. And so again, we were already starting to provide information to our members, and we were starting to engage government at that particular time. Second slide on it, just in terms of our interventions, you know, by March, we had developed our own set of what we called our industry action plan. It was a 10-point plan, both preventative and mitigating controls, obviously all based on a risk-based approach. And by April, we had already developed a set of standard operating procedures. We had engaged government on it, and government itself actually adopted those standard operating procedures, working with us in terms of gazetting the sort of basis. I mean, there was a high degree of synergy between what government was thinking and what we were thinking at that particular time. A number of different guidance issues were given to the industry or shared with the industry. And again, that's one of the real functions of the Minerals Council at an implementation level, is sharing leading global practice on driving issues. If I can just say on the standard operating procedures, this particular standard operating procedure was downloaded 42,000 times from the Minerals Council website last year, just to illustrate the number of people that logged in to see how the mining sector was handling the pandemic, given the fact that we handle it, in our view, considerably better than many other different sectors. And in fact, we had a number of information sharing sessions with other sectors just to demonstrate what was happening in the sector. There's a lot of detail here, but you see the DMRE guidelines in May. We talked about other guidelines we had produced over time, briefing both Parliament, civil society, our efforts around providing oxygen to hospitals, our efforts around managing the third wave, the second wave. In the top right-hand side, you should be saying the second wave in January, and that was obviously through escalated testing after screening. By April, we had also issued a further guidance note to members on managing the Easter break. And obviously in January of this year, we had already started engaging government on the issues around vaccinations. And again, our typical measures: prevention, risk assessment of workplaces, management of cases, collaboration where possible with government and between companies. And I think these interventions all worked well. What has been the result? This particular slide just demonstrates we've basically done, on average, screening about 390,000 people per day. We've done a total tests of 134,000. We've detected 33,000 positive cases. We've unfortunately had 387 deaths. And by the way, there were 199 deaths by the end of last year. So in the first 4 and a bit months of this year, we've had literally another 188 deaths, in the sector, which has been a little bit unfortunate. On the right-hand side here, you can see that the mining test rate at 28.4% is much higher than the national test rate, but pretty similar to the global test rate. So again, the industry has been leading the charge on the testing side. And then you can see this particular chart shows the first wave going to the second wave, and we're just hoping that we don't end up going into a third wave. And again, the importance of just managing the pandemic with all the preventative controls being critical. We've supported communities. I'm not going to go into the detail of the slide. I'm just going to illustrate it. Just if we take the Northern Cape, the industry delivered more than 101 million rands worth of supplies to local hospitals and communities. And that is just one of the illustrative examples of how the industry has really made a difference in the lives of communities. Getting into the economics of the sector, make no mistake, mining still really matters for South Africa. At a GDP level, we're about 8% of GDP. And if you take all the multipliers, it takes us up to about 17%. And if you look at on the bottom left-hand side of this particular pie chart, our contributions in terms of PAYE from our employees that are employed in the sector, our company taxes paid, our royalties paid, our employee earnings, and the broader impact of the sector in terms of our procurement spend remains very, very significant. A couple of quick ideas on production. Just want to show you the left-hand chart up here. The left-hand chart just really demonstrates this is a mining production index, and you can see the huge impact in the second quarter of 2020 of effectively the switch off of the industry. There were a couple of parts of the industry that were allowed to continue working, and very quickly through our engagements with the DMRE and with other parts of government, I think there was a recognition that it was important to get the mining sector back on track as quickly as possible. And you can see that we did have a pretty quick recovery in production in the third and fourth quarters. I'm not going to go into the detail of the other bits of the slide, but just to highlight in this particular chart that in the mining production numbers literally came out yesterday for February. We are 0.8% higher in terms of mining production in February than we were in the pre-COVID production level. So we're back to where we were pre-COVID, or slightly higher than we were pre-COVID, and that's a little bit of the good news that we're seeing feed through the numbers. Unfortunately, for the year, for the 12 months, the 12-month average, we were down by roughly 12% in terms of mining production, but it's good news that we're starting to see production levels, despite the fact that we still don't have 60,000 employees back in the office at the moment, because of obviously comorbidities, or they are over the age of 60. And so that's a very interesting performance from the sector in the meantime. This is a year-to-date mining production numbers. So production's down 12%, export values were up 23%. And just to highlight a couple of the areas, if we just looked at, for example, our production base for different minerals, if we just look at, for example, areas like building materials, the actual physical volume of production in the 12 months was down 18%, but the actual export values were up by over 21%. If we look down at the bottom here, including gold, our total export values were up over 23% based on a certain set of numbers, but our actual mining production was down by 11.9%. So just to highlight the different commodities, I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but just illustrates the various trends. Perhaps the sector that was most negatively affected from a revenue perspective was the coal sector, where they had a 7% decline in production, but because of lower dollar and rand prices, they were in a slightly more difficult space. This is sales and exports by commodity, and again, I just want to make the comment on the sales on the 12 months to the end of February, and in terms of export sales, you can see the export sales numbers are in red, the domestic sales numbers are in blue, and the fact is that our domestic sales were obviously weaker given the state of the domestic economy, which has been obviously quite weak. Top left-hand slide, it really demonstrates the China effect, and this is changes in metal demand during crises. And so the top left-hand chart talks about the global financial crisis and then the COVID-19 area, and you can see the rest of the world, which is the blue numbers, and obviously the impact of China. And you can see in the global financial crisis, it took quite a bit of time for a recovery to take place, despite the fact that it was mostly driven by China, with the rest of the world eventually catching up. Our recovery now has mostly been driven by China in terms of their demand profiles. Nice improvements in commodity prices, particularly in dollar levels, and obviously also feeding through on a rand basis. And then this just looks at sales and exports, and you can see how our domestic sales performance, our overall sales performance has been positive. Our pricing indexes are looking positive, despite the fact that our production numbers have gone, have obviously been under pressure, down roughly 12% last year. And then these are exports by commodity, and I think just taking a number of the different commodities, if we look at stone and sand, we're looking at exports both in terms of tonnage and value being up about 21%. But look at some of the other areas. I mean, if you look at we produce a very small amount of copper that was up 57%, iron ore up 40% from a export value perspective, despite the fact that our actual volume of exports declined, obviously due to some logistical constraints, etc. Quick look at a couple of slides here that talk about how these shocks last, and just to illustrate on the top left-hand chart, the impact. This is an index of production. So we've recovered our production. We didn't have the same negative impact on production at the time of the global financial crisis. But if you look at our export trends, the COVID-19 pandemic, our export recovery has been much better from a revenue perspective, and I think that's obviously encouraging. Employment has been holding up at about the 450,000 employee level, but obviously it's come off the peaks that we saw, sometime basically about 20 years ago, and that's one of the challenges that we are facing in the sector. I'm not going to deal with the logistics side because I'm going to touch on that in a couple of slides, and I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm halfway through the presentation. But a couple of country level slides which I think are really important. This is the country's total government expenditure, the blue line, and the country's total revenue, which is the red line, and that's obviously sourced from the Reserve Bank, from the Treasury. And you can see the opening jaws of the hippo, which the Minister of Finance keeps on telling us we need to close. One interesting anecdote is that the mining sector played a critical role in this February budget in terms of our increased royalty payments and our increased tax payments in enabling the Treasury not to have to increase tax rates and to actually put in place a little bit more of a pro-growth budget, which is obviously a welcome development. But the point is that South Africa is facing an impending sovereign debt crisis. Our debt levels are now sitting at over 80% of GDP. And so a lot needs to be done to get the economy back on track. On the right-hand side here, I just want to show this is South Africa's actual growth performance relative to what we call our potential growth rate, what we should be growing at versus what we're actually growing at. And so we are significantly underperforming our potential growth, and that requires a huge level of unblocking of a set of areas in the economy. If I get back to mining again, I just want to highlight on the exploration side, just not a huge amount of exploration, particularly greenfields exploration taking place in the country. And on the right-hand slide, what we've done here is we've shown the exploration levels. We've got the construction of new mines, which is started to recover up until 2019. and overall fixed capital formation in the economy had started recovering before the global financial crisis actually hit. So just on the mining side, let's have a look at a couple of the key measures. The Fraser Institute survey obviously has an investment attractiveness index, and they also have a policy scorecard. And on the policy perception index, what I've done here is I've just highlighted how Botswana has done since they were first listed in 2005 versus South Africa. We were first listed in 2001. And you can see that South Africa's average score out of 100 in terms of our policy scorecard is 44 versus Botswana, which is 72.9. And in fact, if you take Botswana's first year, which was the first and only year that they were in the worst quartile, their average rate is actually over 75%, which places them in the top quartile for much of the last 2 decades. Whereas on the South African side, we've been in the second worst quartile for much of the last 2 decades. I think the period 2005 to 2017 was a dismal period, with South Africa's average ratings being somewhere around about 30% out of 100. But I do think it's important to point out, since 2018, under the new administration of President Ramaphosa and with Minister Mantashe coming into the sector, you can see that the scores have jumped up by about 20 percentage points, which illustrates the positive impact that that the minister and the new administration has had. The problem is that many other countries have continued to improve their performance, and so we've actually slid a little bit further down the rankings, requiring a bit more effort in terms of what we do in terms of making us more attractive from an investment attractiveness and from a policy scorecard perspective. So the 8 institutional and structural constraints affecting us, the ideas and concepts around a shared vision, clearly electricity supply and logistical bottlenecks are critical, regulatory and policy uncertainty, are factors that have come in, the cost competitiveness of the sector. Quite a large number of our amount of our sector sits at the upper end of the cost quartile. We have certain geological factors that we haven't progressed enough to make South Africa a much more attractive destination from a geological perspective, despite the fact that South Africa has huge geological potential. We have a number of ESG challenges, and then obviously we've got the crime and illegal mining sides. And then there are regulatory bottlenecks. This is a slide that was presented by the DMRE in Parliament sometime in March, and you can see that there are 2,500 outstanding prospecting rights. So these rights have not been processed. They're still outstanding they haven't been done within the time frame that they're supposed to be done within, and you can look at the mining rights, the Section 11s, etc. So despite the human tragedy of COVID-19, I guess the question we need to ask ourselves is, has the COVID-19 crisis catalyzed better cooperation between the industry represented through the Minerals Council, and obviously ASPASA, one of our important members, and the DMRE? So I think there's been significant leadership engagement taking place between the minister and the leadership team, both the office bearers, myself and my senior executive team, with the minister and his team. And there's agreement on the critical need to revive mining in the new normal. We don't talk about a post-COVID-19 period because there is no such thing as a post-COVID-19 period. It's a new normal. There's a number of different agreements. We had agreed on the standard operating procedures and how to manage the pandemic and how to get as much of the sector back to work under the lockdown conditions. We have agreement through positive collaboration that we can get exploration to above 5% of global expenditure. We're sitting at 1% at the moment, and to get mining GDP above 10%. So there's agreement that that's a target. That's more of a shared vision for where we're going to. We've agreed and developed 6 task teams, developing a shared vision, new exploration plan, dealing with regulatory challenges, dealing with network industry bottlenecks, particularly around electricity and rail, encouraging beneficiation, localization, and then obviously collaborative promotion. So some areas of progress. So to give a bit of good news, mining certainly has featured in the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan announced by the President, and we were involved in the 7-aside NEDLAC leadership process with the President. There is agreement on how we can get the sector back to 5% on exploration, etc. There's a new exploration plan. We've played a role in helping to develop it with our ideas, and that hopefully will be released fairly soon. We have submitted a list of more than 100 outstanding authorizations, which basically bottleneck 30 billion in CAPEX. So that's CAPEX that's been approved but can't be spent until those regulatory authorizations have been approved. And there's regular engagement with the DG, the DDG on sorting those out. We have a commitment by the DMRE to halve licensing times We still think that those licensing times are not competitive enough at a global level, but that's part of a discussion that's taking place. And then water use licenses, they're looking at reducing the time on those to 90 days, and any of the backlog ones are being dealt with, including through Operation Vulindlela. We've seen quite material progress on the issues around self-generation and unlocking the bottlenecks. We've had discussions with the Minister, the DG, Operation Vulindlela, and the Presidency, and the Infrastructure and Investment Office, and additional engagements have been taking place with NERSA and Eskom. And in our last board meeting of the Minerals Council, we had the Eskom CEO and his team having a bit of a chat about some of these bottlenecks, and there have been follow-up discussions on that already. We've also formalized engagements with Transnet. We have some specific task teams that are looking at how to unlock and unblock those bottlenecks. And I just want to say to all of you that if I just take one example, 60% of the reason why we're not getting railway wagons delivered to our Chrome operators is because of cable theft on the rail lines or something like that in terms of the percentage. And so we're looking at how we collaborate on improving security, what we've learned, what they've learned, etc., etc. And that's part of the process. So our priority actions around the shared vision, regulatory reform, industry modernization, improving infrastructure, particularly around allowing the private sector to participate in infrastructure, improving our ESG performance, unlocking exploration, implementing measures to control crime, promoting investment are all critical, and we are certainly driving those agendas. I just wanted to highlight a couple of quick points if I can. I do have a couple of minutes left there, Nico, 3.5 to be exact. What we're looking at here is just look at Canada. Per year for the last 18 years, they've attracted about $2 billion in exploration spend in their country. Australia about 1.8 billion, and we're sitting at $194 million a year on average. Last year, well, the last official data that we have, we were sitting at 1% of total expenditure, and only 10% of this 1% is greenfield exploration. We know what the challenges are, we know what we need, and on the right-hand side, we've highlighted a new mining cadastral system, tax incentives, a transparent system, a one-stop shop application process, and that could unlock a huge new pipeline for the sector. On modernization, through the Mandela Mining Precinct and through the efforts of the industry collectively, collaboratively, we are looking at how we can improve productivity, improve processes, look at global best practices and adopt them in the sector, etc., and making it a people-centered fourth industrial revolution and how we adapt that back into the sector, which is also helpful for our gender agenda. And then just a second last slide on the vaccination side. The Minerals Council has been very actively involved in a lot of the different discussions with government, initially around helping to top-up fund the vaccine process, although Treasury then took on the responsibility of funding the vaccines in collaboration with the medical aids. And but our collaboration here and our commitment is that we need to play a role in not only talking about the issue, which is giving a positive message about the fact that vaccination program is critical to getting South Africa's economy back on track, and in terms of accessing the vaccines, which is currently government's responsibility. But our role is also very much about how we can actually deliver jabs into arms. And so we've given our support to government. Significant engagement has taken place. There's been good collaboration. We've met with all the trade unions in a couple of meetings already this year on the vaccination side. We have an extensive communications plan in place, working with the trade unions, which is on our website, which talks about the vaccination program, why it's important. And from the industry perspective, the companies have committed to do something between 60 to 80,000 vaccinations a day once we get access to the vaccines, and that'll be a in-kind contribution by the sector of something like 300 million rand. It's in our interest to play a role in not only vaccinating our members in terms of our employees, but also in terms of vaccinating our community members. So we see this as a critically important component, and we're certainly working in collaboration with government, the trade unions, to roll out the vaccine. So last slide, just want to make the point, mining really does matter for South Africa. I think we've had a very fertile, catalytic period for the sector in the last 2 years, particularly under this COVID period. It's really galvanized the engagement process taking place between government, ourselves, and with the trade unions. We're recognizing that we all are in the same canoe, that we actually need to paddle together towards the calmer water so that we can fix the holes in the canoe. And those holes are issues around competitiveness, productivity, structural reforms, etc. we're making progress. The trajectory is starting to look more positive. There's a lot of work still to be done, but I think this just sets the groundwork for the future trajectory of the industry. So Nico, thanks very much, and that is exactly time up from my side, and I hope the contribution was useful to your members.
Thanks, Roger. That was great. Just two questions. One, could we have a copy of the slides? Will we be able to use them or share them?
Nico, absolutely, for sure. You know, these things are absolutely available to you. It's not a closed confidential meeting, so I'm very happy to share those with you.
Thanks. Is there anybody that has the need to make one comment or ask one question? Let's allow maybe one or so. If there's somebody that's got a burning issue, is there anybody? Seems not. Thanks, Roger. I must just thank you very much, Roger. I think that was a lot of information which we can see why you are seen as the leader in many parts of the industry. Thanks for coming. I hope you stay on with us. Okay.
Nico, thanks. Look forward to the next presentations. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Then the second person that I'm now going to introduce is Belinda. Now, Belinda is new in her position as the chairperson or the president of South African Coal Ash Association. It's been a part of the industry that's been left behind at some stage, and Belinda came in, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but she kicked some asses, and now people are running around. So I said we couldn't have this if Belinda wasn't there. So Belinda, are you ready? Can you start?
Hi, Nico. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity. Will they put up my slides? Great. As Nico has said, that coal ash, especially fly ash, is a very controversial subject. The main producer is Eskom, and we shouldn't discount Sasol as well. I'd like to just reiterate the role of the South African Coal Ash Association. We are the umbrella for ash producers, marketers, users, universities, and individuals playing an active role in the promotion of responsible ash utilization in South Africa. This is mainly for the growth and the development by our members for the benefit of the South African economy. The Coal Ash Association is also associated with many other international ash associations, and we have even presented in the World Ash Conferences previously. The South African coal ash industry is the voice for ash-related matters by influencing key decision makers, policy, strategy, and in consultation with the members on behalf of our members. If we go back and we look at coal ash, especially Eskom ash, there are 15 coal-fired power plants, and they produce on average about 33 million tons of ash per year. 80% of that 33 million tons is fly ash and 20% is coarse ash. There's also the clinker ash, which is available from the first generation power stations. And Eskom has been selling ash basically for the past 3 decades. Over the past 3 years, we've noticed there's been a huge interest internationally as well as locally, which has led Eskom, together in consultation with the Ash Association, to review the policies in place. 2019, Eskom concluded a tender, and in April 2020, this was 14 contracts, SMMEs were awarded, and renewals on 3 cement manufacturers. In the same period, 2020, Eskom received the exclusion as well as SASL on the regulations that ash is no longer a waste product, and it's received an end of waste status. We go a little bit further on and we have a look at the availability of coal ash. We will see in the period 2020-21, there was less ash sold, only 8%, but Eskom was quite, they've reviewed their policies, they've awarded new contracts, and they're quite positive that they can increase this to up to above 25%. And obviously the Coal Ash Association is very involved in identifying new applications for coal ash to be used. We have a look at the power station performance. Next slide, thank you. We will see the main power stations that are producing fly ash is Creel, Letaba and Matla. That is controlled by the cement companies currently, and Eskom have identified that there could be a broader focus of making ash available commercially for new applications and existing applications. We have a look at a demand model. We look at a 2.5% growth, where we're currently on about 4 million tonnes per annum. We are hoping in the next 7 or 8 years to increase that by another 1 million tonnes. We have a look at a Porter's 5 forces model. We have a look at the supplier power, which is very, very high. It's Eskom and SASL, but mainly Eskom. We look at a threat of new entrants. Definitely, there is a certainty of new entrants coming in, and this is the Coal Ash Association wants to play an important role in guiding the new entrants on new applications as well as existing applications. We have a look at the customer power. This is various with various degrees of impact. The threat of substitution, various with a limited impact. Coal ash is very cheap. It's the location to market that makes it more expensive. If we have a look at the competitor rivalry, this is high. We've got 14 new offtake agreements signed at various power stations, and there will be a lot of competitor rivalry. What can be done by the Coal Ash Association? There are currently some serious challenges in place, and that's the consistency of supply, the age of the average off-taker equipment, as well as the age of equipment at the power stations, the availability of the feed ash out of the power stations. There needs to be a lot more transparency there. The consistency and compliance of the ashes produced, consistency of coal that's been supplied to the power stations, and the monitoring, the compliance and the monitoring of the fly ash produced by the current off-takers. Very, very important. Ash has received quite a bad name for itself in the industry over the last couple of years, and there's been a lot of blame between off-takers and the producers. Some of our key focus areas are to concentrate on the reliability of the ash types, looking at solutions, not always blaming everybody. There is solutions. Assisting the new off-takers to become compliant, to produce a quality ash that can be used in the cementitious industry as well as in other applications. And the technical compliances from the power stations. It's been a very distant relationship between the off-taker and the power station, and Eskom have currently split up the roles in Eskom, and ash is falling under generation at the moment, and we feel that's a good place for it to sit. The new CEO of generation, he's very hands-on. He's been at ERI. There's a good relationship. And in the last 2 months, there's been a working group set up by Eskom to say, how can we tie all this together and how can we make this product available? We see the dumps. It's not only the dumps, it's the ash produced, it's controlling the amount of landfill sites that are being built. And we feel as the Coal Ash Association that we have an important role here. Thank you, everyone. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thanks, Belinda. Any questions, any comments? Just say thanks for that brilliant presentation. And yeah, I've got it already, so we will circulate it. Oscar is there. Oscar, you can fire.
Belinda, just a question. You mentioned in your presentation what was it called? The effluent sink. What is the effluent sink referred to?
That is what Eskom require to manage their water tables.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Anybody else? I don't see your hand, sorry. Thanks, Oscar. Thanks, Belinda.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. You're staying on, eh? Don't go away.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Right. Our next speaker is Peter Fourie. Morning, Peter. I haven't said hello to you. I saw you came in, but then I was distracted, trying to prove that I've got a tie. Welcome, and thanks for agreeing to come and talk here. I'm going to hand over to you, and I know you're going to keep it.
Okay, just one technical problem. The company that's renting the floor above us are busy moving out, and they started jackhammering.
Don't worry.
So I don't know if you can pick up the noise.
Vaguely, but normally the Hari does make more noise than the jackhammer.
Okay. Okay, so if it doesn't bother you, otherwise I've got to move to other offices and try and move it around. But if it doesn't bother you, then it's fine.
Thanks, Peter.
Can you just give me a second? I'm just going to send somebody to go and stop them.
Okay.
I'll be with you now.
It stopped.
Peter, don't stop them. They'll be using some materials to do that building.
Thanks, Peter. You didn't swear. We didn't hear the swear words. Your mic is off, eh? If you're going to start. Thanks.
Right, apologies for that. And thank you, Nico, for the opportunity. I think, first of all, if I can just say that the views expressed on my own, it doesn't represent the company or Cement and Concrete South Africa, which is, by the way, the new structure that's an amalgamation between the Concrete Institute, the Concrete Society, the gap that was left by SARMA, so quite an exciting development, but I'm not here to speak on their behalf. I have been in the cement industry for maybe too long now. I was first an ignored customer when I was in construction for 16 years. Then joined the cement industry in 1995 and have been in it since then, other than 3 months sabbatical that I took. So the views come from experience, and I think the most difficult time that I've seen during the last 25 years in the industry. So just to cut to the chase immediately, what is the current industry drivers? And there are basically 4 elements that impact quite heavily on cement today. The one is uncertainty. The one is a question mark around sustainability. There's obviously an oversupply, but then there's quite a big opportunity. So if we can hang on, and I'll show some of the hanging on in a moment. But obviously the big impact and uncertainty is COVID. Now, yeah, I'm not talking about the third wave. Yes, we might have it. That could obviously have an impact. But we had a massive impact with lockdown, where we had 38 days of full lockdown and then another month of operating at 50%. Now, those of you that have been to a cement plant or understand a cement plant will know that you cannot operate the cement plant at 50% employment. So we had to make quite a few changes as an industry, and that resulted in quite a major loss of sales, and obviously there were no sales during that period either, which I'll get to. But the other part of the uncertainty is the fact that since lockdown, building material sales boomed, and we got to record levels very soon after lockdown, certainly second half of the year. Those have mainly been caused by, and you find that around the world, but those have mainly been caused by people spending more time at home, not spending time on traveling, not spending time on some of the luxuries, and all of a sudden finding out that their roofs are actually leaking, and some of the structures need to be improved, and we certainly had a good second half. Was impact basically saved the industry from what it suffered early on in the year. The uncertainty about it is how long that spending pattern is going to continue. We simply don't know. We have seen some slowdown, and that might be related to people's private spending behavior changes. The other uncertainties is political instability. You can take your own view on it, but it is something that could influence the industry. The economic outlook is, yeah, there's some hope there, but if you look at the fundamentals that I'll get to just now, you'll see that there needs to be a serious restructuring of the economic playing field in order to survive. Carbon tax, there's a lot of talk about the next phase of carbon tax, which could have a massive impact on the industry, as well as Eskom. And there I'm talking both in terms of load shedding. Electricity is a major input for cement production, but also the uncertainty about ash, and I'm glad I don't have to go into it. I think Belinda covered that. Sustainability, it's not a secret that most if not all, the cement producers in South Africa have got distressed balance sheets. You read about it in the newspapers, and those that are not public, you don't read about, but we know from the bank's perspective that they are distressed. One of them were taken over by the banks now. It is a capital-intensive industry, so if you're under distress on the balance sheet, the long-term sustainability of the industry must be questioned. And it's shown by EBITDA margins that have now dropped below 20%. 20% sounds like high EBITDA, but if you look at the capital intensity, you need to be sustainable and to be able to build new factories timeously. You need EBITDA margins historically around 30% in order for it to be sustainable, and in order to build new plants when it's required. What's driving that is that the 2020 sales prices are at the 2014 levels. Now, I've got to take some blame for that we entered the market in 2014, and maybe we started some of the downward trend, but then there were other entrants as well. So we're ending up at the moment with an oversupply, estimated capacity at 19 million tons, with a demand around 13 million tons and imports around 1 million tons. So quite a large oversupply, which is also driving the price spiral downwards. The opportunities are real. If you look at the infrastructure development plan with the strategic infrastructure projects, those are starting to happen. Now, as an industry, we've had discussions with Dr. Ramagopa, who's heading up this initiative. And frankly, I'm very impressed with what's happening there, the levels of sustainability of the projects they're talking about. And as most of you will probably know, the first tenders have been awarded, and they're long-term tenders. So just the cement consumption that could come from those infrastructure projects is large. We are ever only expecting to see them towards the end of the year, or the cement consumption. Like any other civil works, you do have to do quite a bit of other work before you start using cement. The other opportunity is consumer spending. We've seen that, as I mentioned, post-COVID, but there's still a very large portion of the economy that's driven by the consumer. And if you look at the state of a lot of, especially in the rural areas of housing, there's a lot of opportunities there, and also, as I mentioned, the post-COVID priorities. Now, just taking those four elements into account, I just want to touch on the producer response. And those of you that are customers will maybe understand what's happened in the last few months, or the last few months of last year, where we experienced some shortages. And the first reaction that customers had was to say, well, how can you have shortages while you have an oversupply? Well, it's easy. If you look at the producer response, especially post-COVID and during COVID, there were major cost cuts in all the companies, and restructuring and mothballing of the less economical kilns. Now, that's all temporary mothballing, but in order to recommission it, you really need to have more certainty about what the future is going to look like. So at the end of last year, we did see the demand go up, as I've explained, but none of the producers really decided, we had 1 or 2 short spells where extra capacity came on. But it's very difficult to now go back and re-employ all those people that you retrenched in order to survive, and now go and get them all back if there's uncertainty about the sustainability of the current levels of sales. So that's a fact. Those mothballed kilns can and will be recommissioned, and my own prediction is that that will happen once the infrastructure projects kick in. I don't expect it to be earlier. If we look at cementitious sales now, this is not inclusive or fully inclusive of the sales, but it's off the same base. It represents the total sales from all integrated producers, and by integrated producers I mean producers that produce clinker as well as cement. And it includes the extenders that are sold by those producers. So what it excludes is extenders that are mainly used by the blenders that are coming from another source other than the main producers. So as I mentioned, it's off the same base. But if you look at what's happened since 2017, there was a major fall off post global crisis. It then moved up slightly up to 2016, and since then it's been coming down again. Now the 2020 numbers are not there, and I just need to mention that according to the Competition Commission, we only allowed to accumulate those numbers and publish the numbers 3 months in arrears, so that the end of 2020 numbers could be or should have been out already. But there's another ruling from the Competition Commission is that it does have to include all the producers, and one of the producers have got some issues with reporting at the moment. So these numbers go down to 2019, but I'll show you some other numbers later. So since the 2007 boom, the numbers have not recovered, and take into account that since 2014, 2 new cement producers entered the market, and hence the big gap between the supply and demand. Sorry, my screen froze. There we go. So if you look at the quarterly cement demand growth, this is year on year quarter, you will see that since 2016 we've been around 0, but we've since quarter 3 2018 we've had consistent negative growth in demand, and quarter 1 and quarter 2 last year obviously influenced by the lockdown. Quarter 3 slightly up, first time that we came back into positive figures, and I would expect quarter 4 to still be positive. Apologies, I'm battling to get this thing to... Okay, if we look at cement pricing, this is indexed. Obviously, we can't disclose real prices, but if you look at from Q1 14, if you take that as a 100 index, PPI inflation based on manufactured goods in Q4 2020 was 42% above Q1 2014. Q4 2020 bulk cement prices are still, or were still 7% below 2014, and bag prices have just recovered to be 4% above. Now, the GDP components driving all of this or influencing the cement production or market is obviously fixed investment. Now, if we just look at what's happened to fixed investment as a percentage of GDP, it's been coming down since 2008, 2009 when we had the boom, and it's down to 16% of GDP, where it used to be as high as 25%. And if you go back further, it's around those levels between 20 and 25. So what we're finding in investment now is that it is contributing towards it being not sustainable, but it just shows how critical it is for the infrastructure programs to get going and to be maintained. The consumption expenditures percentage of GDP, on the other hand, has now moved up to over 60%, and used to hover around 60. I think on average it's 59% over the year. So what we have found in the cement industry is bag sales, especially in rural areas, is where the growth is coming from, or that's what's sustaining it. If you look at urban areas, the sales are quite low and very negative. So even the recovery post-COVID occurred mostly in the rural areas. And then, yeah, the top slide left-hand quarter, or top left-hand quarter is total investment, but the capital investment as a percentage of GDP is also around 16%. So this is the major problem that we are facing. The lifeline of the industry will only be sustained by the investment or the infrastructure development program. If you look at just the consumption expenditure, a lot of this, my own view is that it's been driven by a very big employment number in government departments. That, yeah, on the one hand is not really sustainable, but politically will probably continue. So I'd like to just close with a quote from Azar Jamin in his latest review that Econometrics has written on the latest Reserve Bank quarterly report. And he says, one of the most worrying features of the South African economy is that less and less is being plowed into the ability to produce goods and services for long-term sustainability. If there's no turnaround in the relationship between growth in investment and growth in consumption, the country will not be able to generate enough foreign exchange to sustain imports of consumer and investment goods, which is a very strong statement. It's a statement that I certainly believe, and I think it's a statement that reflects the situation that the cement industry finds itself in. But with the initiatives from the President's office to turn this around, I believe that the cement industry will return to the levels that it deserves. Without the cement industry, the country's, yeah, I won't use that swear word that I used just now to stop the guys upstairs, but the industry cannot survive. So we are all hoping for this new development. We're very happy that the first contracts have been awarded, and we're looking forward to a great future. Just one thing for the customers that are out there that might be on the call, I think just seeing the slide about prices, I think you've got to expect to see price increases to help the cement industry recover from where it is at the moment.
Thanks, Peter. Finished. Peter, I hear your jackhammers came back. Sorry.
No, not yet.
Are we allowed to get your presentation?
Yes, I'll send it to you. Most
definitely. Is there anybody that wants to make a comment or that wants to ask Peter a question or something to that effect? Let's give a gap. Otherwise, you know, these conferences tend to become very boring. Maybe there's somebody with a question or a comment. Anybody? Right, it seems to me you're off the hook, Peter. Thanks for covering a very complicated part of the industry, the cement industry. So thanks for coming, giving us, because you've got the experience and you've got the name and you're the guy that knows it. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I will see you when I come up to Joburg at some stage. You ask Belinda to organize a lunch. We will have a lunch. We won't talk about cement. Thanks, Peter. You're staying on, eh?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Right. Now, here we go. Our next speaker, I just must say this, and it's most probably not very professional, but he's my mentor. He's much younger than me, but I listen to what he says. Him and my wife. But this is Andries van Heerden. He's the CEO of a company called AfriMat. And thank you, Andries. You're also in the Cape. Thank you for being willing to speak. And thanks for always supporting ASPASA. Thank you very much.
Nico, you got yourself out of big trouble there with that mentor statement, because those of you that saw the first document that went out, Nico actually had the AfriSam logo next to my name. So I was planning to give him a bit of stick today, but since he calls me a mentor, I'll be soft on him now. Nico, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. It's quite a difficult thing to speak after many good speakers before you that had the chance to speak before you. We've heard from Roger that the mining industry is really not in a bad space. We've heard from Peter that there's a little bit of mixed bag information from the cement industry. But if you take a snapshot right now, the demand is good and pricing is starting to pick up and things like that. So if we want to try and look at the small mining industry and look at that in context, it's quite a challenge for me to speak after all these people. So I've decided to take a slightly different approach, a little bit more philosophical, a little bit of context, and then maybe to see what is there that we can do. So firstly, from a philosophical point of view, you can either choose to actually take charge of whatever you're doing and try to drive a specific future and drive towards an ideal future, or you can just let things happen and let the current future as it is happening you can just let things happen and so almost become a victim. Now, as we are speaking to the senior management of this industry, I really do think we should take the second approach. We should take charge of our own destiny and try to drive things to become more to our liking, if you would like to say that. So let me first start off with a little bit of context. I've been in the industry for 20 years now. I joined the industry in 2001 when I joined a small company called Prima Klipbrekers in Worcester in 2001. Back then, the blue chip companies in our industry was PPC, Marion Roberts, Avenge. They were all blue chips. There were others. Group 5 were very good. They're all good companies, but the market rated them very highly. The industry, to a large extent, was dictated to by companies like Lafarge and Wholesome back in the day. A lot of the initiatives in the industry, a lot of the programs that were driven, they were all from, or not all of them, but very strongly influenced by Wholesome and Lafarge back in the day. In 2001, when I joined Prima, it was a relatively small company, although they had a subsidiary in Namibia, they had ready-mix businesses, they had a brick and block business, and they had 5 or 6 quarries in the Western Cape. But that entire group in February 2001, just before I joined it, made a profit before interest and tax of 2 million rand. That was after the crisis that we all had in 1998 when interest rates skyrocketed and things like that. So that was the industry that I joined. In 2003, things started changing for the industry. We saw the new mining charter, the first version of the mining charter that came out. BEE was a relatively new concept to us. Can you imagine? There was a time that we didn't know what BEE was standing for. Things started to change, and we as an industry was challenged for the first time with having to change. In 2004, we started seeing the first signs of a boom. Peter just, in the previous presentation, touched on on the 2008 volumes, 2007 volumes. And for a lot of us that's been in the industry a long time, we tend to remember that period as what the industry should look like. But if you look at that graph that Peter showed just now about cement volumes, you would have seen that there was a spike over that period that started in 2004 up until 2008, and then it just tended back to the long-term trend that it was on. So 2004 to 2008 was an exceptional time, and was probably the best time in the industry for most of us. Back in the day, at that period, we saw the South African economy accelerating, the growth rate accelerating. We saw a budget surplus. We saw sovereign debt at the lowest levels in a long, long time. I remember attending a session or a year-end function that Power Construction used to have in those days in the Western Cape. And I remember Graham Power in October 2004, he said that as an industry, we are our own biggest enemies because we don't believe that this economy is actually picking up, and that we are that we are about to see unprecedented growth rates. That was in 2004. Some of us agreed or accepted that, and some of us didn't. So in 2005, we saw the boom really get going. And I still think 2005, 2006 was really the best years ever for this industry. I can remember that was when my partners and I bought Lancaster, and we saw that you literally just had to unlock the gates those days, and the product would go out. And the cement industry, Peter, I still haven't forgiven you guys for being extremely harsh on us in those days with cement price increases. So Peter, you're still there. You still owe me for that. You guys gave us a hell of a hard time then. We then saw all of a sudden in late 2005, 2006, and 2007, we saw this listing boom. Anything that smelt like construction was listed at high multiples. And some of us, I think it's probably still only us and Robex are still around that listed in those days. I think Werner's also still listed. But it was easy. It was easy money. We listed companies in those times. We saw that listing boom. What's interesting is early in 2007, our in-house economist told me that there's red lights flashing. There's a new National Credit Act coming, and that is going to change everything for the industry. And it did. Not many of us saw it, but the real turning point was in July 2007, when the new National Credit Act came in. Obviously, we still had the effect of projects that were still running up until 2008, but we saw a sharp drop-off in 2008, and then the global economic crisis came in 2008 to really spoil all the fun. In 2009, we saw a major political change where Mr. Zuma came to power, and that started a new era that ran for the next 9 years, from 2009 to 2018, where corruption started to become rampant. We saw a rapid decline of most institutions. The SOEs went down the tubes. We saw Eskom's decline, all the rest. And, you know, can we still remember the terrible days when Mr. Zwane was the Minister of Mineral Resources? That was a really tough time. And we saw things like the draft third mining charter, which was really a desperate time for many of us. That, by the way, was the time when Afrimat actually decided to go into iron ore so that we can earn dollars, because we thought that we needed to get a foreign revenue as well. So in 2018, we saw the Ramaphoria that came with our current president, Mr. Ramaphosa, coming to office. There was a lot of excitement. There was all these promises of recovery and return to basics. That was great. And then we saw the COVID crisis that hit us in 2020. So over the last 20 years, the industry has, for a very short period between, say, 2005 until 2008, we had this boom period. But other than that, our industry has always been plagued with some challenges, and it's no different today. And we must just see that in that context. If we look at the modern history, and here I must give both Roger at the Minerals Council and the ASPASA team under Nico, they've really done fantastic work in the last couple of years on a couple of fronts. For instance, for us as small miners or small surface miners, when the draft mining charter, the latest draft mining charter came out, ASPASA actually had a very strong influence, and you will see that there are tables in the latest charter for ownership regulations and stuff like that for junior miners that are softer than what is for the majors. That was actually designed in the offices of ASPASA members, and those tables have been incorporated into that charter exactly like it was drawn up in the ASPASA offices. Another influence that we had behind the scenes as an industry was in 2020, during lockdown level 5 and level 4. There was a lot of work going on behind the scenes to influence the regulation so that we could open up our industry and start working, which happened when level 3 came in, and the original draft did not include that. So that was something that was influenced in that period. We also see a big influence of ASPASA and right now in the whole debate around royalty tax and how that impacts us, and also in the whole argument around diesel rebates. It's a very important big part of our profitability, and ASPASA and we as an industry really is playing a bigger and bigger role in that to get that right. So that's just broader from an industry perspective. The previous speakers, specifically Peter, have touched on the current reality in the South African economy. But did you also pick up that with us as leaders, we sometimes don't even realize that there's a certain level of despondency just because of the whole thing around COVID-19 and the impact it had on us and how difficult it is. What we don't always realize is how much better we are right now to what we thought we would be in April 2020. Go back to I'll never forget the Thursday evening before Easter weekend in 2020 when the president announced the lengthening of the lockdown, and how me and my exco worked that night and the next early into Good Friday morning, and by 11 o'clock we had our new strategy how to work with that, and we were grateful we were able to pay our people full salaries in that period. But it was a very difficult time at the time because we thought we didn't know how the future looked and where things were going. And that despondency is still with us. We still have that in us. But if we look at the positives, right now the interest rates in our country is the lowest in my lifetime. I've never seen interest rates in my lifetime as low as it is right now. We've seen a tax reduction, both in personal tax, and I think that was pretty much due, but we've also seen a reduction in companies tax, where we went down from 28 to 27%. I just received a report yesterday from Investec where they say that consumers are in a much, much better state than everybody thought, and they've got all their measures on how they do it. Now, consumers in this country are actually doing a lot better than we all thought. We've seen an unexpected, and I'll share a presentation with you in a minute, that we publish every quarter on the what we call the Afrimat Construction Index, and I'll just share some of the slides with you quickly to prove what I'm saying. But we saw a sharp V-shaped recovery after the COVID-19, and I don't always think we realize how important that is and how well that actually bodes for the future. And we are seeing, Peter was touching on the infrastructure projects that are coming out. We've seen the contracts that Robex have announced that they won on the N3. We've seen more, all those projects that were gazetted in the government gazette a few months ago. We see more contracts, we hear of more contracts coming out from Sunroll and going out to tender. So, these are the positives that we don't always really sit back and think about. And I want to repeat what Graham Power said in 2004. We as an industry must not be our own worst enemy and keep on believing the negative narrative that's going around. If you want to get a negative narrative, just read a newspaper. I recently did an interview with a journalist, and she started off with, "Do you agree that the industry is in dire straits?" I said, "No, why would I agree? I actually think," and I quoted a few numbers, and a few weeks later there was an article in the Financial Mail calling me Mr. Glass Half Full. But I really do think that as leaders, that is our role. We need to, if we all decide that the future is going to be that bad, we might as well just pack up and go, because we as leaders must make that change that we want. I am going to share a few slides quickly. If you can bear with me for a second, I just want to make sure that I share the right slides. Let me just make double sure I've got the right slides. I think it's this one. You should see the Afrimat Construction Index slides in front of you right now. I cannot see any faces right now. So, Nico, can you maybe just switch on your mic and confirm whether you can see it, please?
Yes, Andries, thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Because I cannot see, when I share this, I cannot see any faces on the screen. So we publish this index once a quarter. Maybe just the reason why we are publishing it. There was a time after 2010 where many of the major construction companies were caught up in some strategic blunders that they made, and they blamed that on a construction industry that is not performing. But from our experience, we actually saw the opposite. We saw volumes increasing, we saw sales increasing, but some of the major construction companies, some of them are not there, are not around anymore, was blaming the industry for their mistakes. And we then decided to publish this index. It's been put together by Dr. Roelof Botha, a renowned economist, to actually, and we find that this is a very close resemblance of what we see happening in the industry. So the Afrimat Construction Index that we publish on a quarterly basis from, you can see it there, from the first quarter in 2017 over the period until the fourth quarter of 2020. Now, it is true, as Peter said, we are since 2017, we are in a declining phase there. If you look at that red line at the top, that is true. But if you look at what happened last year, this time, we saw this very sharp drop-off when COVID happened, and we all knew that. But look at that recovery. We saw a very sharp recovery, very well above by the way, 100 index points is what the industry was at in the first quarter of 2011. So we are still, we jumped up above that level of 2011. Yeah, I suppose you can look at it in two ways. It's not as good as it was there in 2017 when we peaked. You'll see in the fourth quarter we were close to 130 index points, now going to just under 110, just over 110 in the fourth quarter. But the point is, look at that V-shaped recovery. If we look at some of the components of this index, the building material sales, there, if you want to see a V-shaped recovery, that is it. Looking at building plans passed, exactly the same trajectory, and what is positive in the fourth quarter, that positive gradient of the line still remained. Remuneration of our employees in the construction industry did the same thing. Hardware sales and even the mortgage advances over the years, there you can see what has happened. There's the consumer price index coming down, which is also good news. And the purchasing managing index is also showing a positive sign there. I'm going to stop it there. I just want to make sure. What are you seeing on the screen right now?
We're seeing you. We only see you.
So have I stopped sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
That's yeah. Excuse me. I'm not I'm old enough to blame that to claim that I'm not good with technology. So whenever I make a mistake, I can pull that card. So what I'm trying to say is Yeah, things are tough. Nothing is ever easy, but it's no different to what this industry has been like for the last 20 years, with a small exception of a small period that most of us remember. And hopefully, the younger guys will not remember it, and then they'll understand that this industry is a tough industry. We do have fantastic opportunities. Peter touched on Dr. Ramakgopa. He's the head of the Investment and Infrastructure Office of the President. He's got a team. We've also had some interaction with some of his team members behind the scenes. And there's a genuine desire from them to get things going. We do have a lot of limitations. It's not easy. The government debt position doesn't make it easy to get all these things done. But then, well, most good business opportunities doesn't come easy, and you've got to be creative in how you get that done. But there is a very strong infrastructure focus. We've touched on the gazetted projects. We've touched on the new projects that has come out. We see a big drive, for instance, in the renewable energy space. That's going to create a lot of work. We saw the drive for commodities driven basically from China, but the fact that the Chinese economy and the US economy is being stimulated so much, that bodes very well for the South African industry, and especially for our commodities. That is going to bring money into the country. Now, we saw, for instance, that we recently saw that the Minister of Finance said that they collected 100 billion rand more than they thought, basically because of mining. The number that I received yesterday from Investec, it was actually not only 100 billion, it's 135 billion that they've collected more than they thought. So these are all things that are bringing money. The commodity boom and all these things are bringing money into the country, and it's about us and us as leadership of the industry. How are we going to use that and derive our company strategies to actually exploit this and make things happen? Challenges that we are faced with. Funding is a problem, especially with government-funded projects, and they need all sorts of creative funding. But just imagine there's about 50 or 60 people on this call. If we all used our brains to actually come up with creative solutions to stimulate projects, whether that is a port and rail project in the Northern Cape, or whether that is a renewable energy project somewhere, or a road or a bridge or whatever, we can think of ways to do that. The combined intelligence that we have in this industry is going to come up with creative solutions, because the old way is not going to work. We must understand that. So funding is a challenge. The other thing that I really want to challenge you as leaders of this industry is the whole thing around skills. We've seen that many of the major companies, and as Peter said, many of the companies are distressed with their balance sheets. And one of the things that they've all cut back on is on training. And we are seeing a skills shortage in this industry, and I see red lights flashing for the entire industry, because we are not training enough people to run our operations efficiently in a world context. We are becoming a real third world industry because we are not training our people. And I think it's a critical thing that the industry should take seriously if we want to survive over the long term, to get our people upskilled a lot. Other challenges that we have closer to home, we see more and more community activity. There's a lot of community unrest in a lot of the industries. It is something that we need to address together with the government. And I think Roger and the guys from the Minerals Council are doing a lot of work with the minister. By the way, my personal impression is this minister is one of the best that we've had in a long, long time, because he is accessible and he's done a lot of good things for the industry. But we need to make sure that we address that. We've touched on some other challenges we have. We as a company, for instance, are having extreme difficulty to get our water use licenses for some exciting new projects. We've announced that we bought the Khoza iron ore mines in the Northern Cape. We are battling, the president said that we'll get our water use license within 90 days. It's more than 180 days and we are still hoping. This is just not on. And as an industry, we need to know Roger and his team is helping our guys to try and get through the red tape there, but it's just not on that this sort of thing happens. By the way, the reason why it happened is because the specific individual that worked with our water use application, his contract was ran out at the end of January. This thing was left on his table and there was just nobody else appointed to take care of it. So it was just not handled. It's just not acceptable. I've touched on the whole thing around skills. So I'm getting to the end of my little preach. We as an industry and we as leaders, we can choose. Are we going to be the victims who are going to complain and remind each other of how good 2008 was? By the way, it wasn't so good because there was a worldwide crisis. But are we going to be that? Or are we going to take charge and actually make a few differences? And I think there are three things that we really need to commit ourselves to as leaders. The first is the training part that I spoke about. We need to upskill our people and we need to spend a proper portion of our revenues on training to get our people ready for the future. The second thing is we need to get involved behind the scenes, whether that is with Dr. Ramakgopa and his team or wherever. We need to be involved and we need to be seen to be involved to help these things along and get them going. And not for our own credit, but to create an industry where all these things happen and where people can find jobs and all the good things. By the way, I recently spoke to somebody on Dr. Ramakgopa's, I don't know if you call it a committee or whatever you call it. And she said one of the reasons why they're starting with small projects is because we've lost so much skills in the industry, in the construction industry and things. And I think what a load of nonsense. The people are still here. They're just not working for the big five listed construction companies anymore. But we still have the skills in the country. And we must just show that and prove that, get involved. And then the last thing, as an industry, I know Niku has been battling to get membership and and there are some of the companies that feel that they, I've heard some leaders saying, oh, but what is ASPASA? What is it worth? If a leader feels that way, he is not informed. ASPASA has done a lot in terms of the new mining charter. It's done a lot in terms of the royalty tax. It's done a lot of, around a lot of things that impacts us as an industry and as an industry body. And we as leaders should make sure that ASPASA is as strong as it possibly can. And if you want to criticize ASPASA, look at yourself, because then you're not playing your part to make it the industry body that it can be. I really personally think, and I was very critical of ASPASA years ago, and I saw the impact they can have in the industry and representing us all as small miners. And I really want to appeal to you as the leadership, support them, be involved, whether that is behind the scenes or actively involved, but don't let poor old Niku fight this fight alone. He's doing a great job, but as a one man, he just cannot do it all. We need to all take hands. We as an industry need to build this industry and build this country, and we can make a big difference. So with that, Niku, thank you for the opportunity, and I don't know if there are any comments or questions.
Thanks, Andries. I don't know if there's any comments, questions. Yeah, is there one? Sorry, my screen is above that. Barry Pierce, yes, Barry.
Morning, and thanks very much for the presentation. I mean, all of them have been really quite enlightening and put a nice positive spin on where we are in the industry. So yeah, it's very much a concept of the glass is half full and not half empty. If I can maybe just make a quick comment with regards to where we are on the audits that we're looking at putting in place. I feel that this could actually be a very good means of underpinning a training initiative, if I can word it in that way, although it's will be perceived as being an audit. So you come in from a technical perspective, you look at how the testing is done with regards to what is produced within the laboratories to help address the issues of non-conforming material. It helps the quarries put out material that is then correctly tested, but at the same time, you're able to get into the labs, have a look at the staff that are there, inform them of what's happening with regards to the changes in the testing methods, and actually benefit them in that regard. Although it falls under the auspices of an audit, it's actually from our perspective, it's seen more in the form of a training initiative than an audit as such. Any comments on that?
Are you asking Andries, Barry?
Yeah, Andries, just your feel on that. I know it is something that has crossed your desk. It was pre-COVID that it was put forward, and just your feel on that as an initiative to try and assist through the ASPASA initiatives or the other audits.
Yeah, I think Barry, I think it can work. I think it can add value. The one thing I would like to guard against is that we must just be careful not to as leadership to delegate the responsibility for training to other people. So if it's some sort of an audit to actually help you find those gaps, that is good. But I think more importantly, as leaders, we must accept personal responsibility to make sure that it is done, as we've done with health and safety and environment and all the other stuff. So I think, it's probably not a bad idea to start with that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Barry. I saw another hand. I think it was Oscar or somebody. Sorry, was it? No. Seems to me.
Ja, ek is reg. Dankie Nico. Ek wou vir Barry 'n kommentaar gegee het oor die laboratorium. Julle weet dit is bietjie naby aan my hart. But thanks for that. I'm fine.
Thanks. And Andries, thanks for the great presentation. Just for those who don't know, it's the second time he's forgiven me. Many years ago when he started, I called them cowboys. I was nearly shot, but now we've got a personal joke. And he says he's the chief cowboy, and I must listen. So yeah, but today they aren't cowboys anymore. Today they're the marshal. But thanks for that, Andries, and thanks for giving us a different perception, and also thanks for confirming that we need top leadership to help ASPASA. If you don't talk to me and other top guys don't talk to me, I don't know what's needed there. And you guys are out there, you know what it is. But thank you very much. And again, your talk and the other talks will be on YouTube. So we'll make that known so people can go and look at that. Thank you very, very much, and keep well. And yeah, I'm going to hand over to the next speaker. Thanks, Andries.
Nico, maybe just before you go, just from my side, for you personally, I know you take a lot of strain and you take this very very seriously. And from my side, thank you. So great.
Right, our next speaker. Only met him last year, and it started off by accident. We started. This body was started to pull the whole construction industry together. And, John Matthews just pulled it so nicely together that, one just became fond of him and what he's doing. But I also found that he doesn't easily take people bullying him. So I thought, yes, I must get him here. And he agreed. I tried to get hold of him. He was in Ugrabies watching at the water. At that stage, it was the highest. So, John, thanks for agreeing, and thanks for starting this body, and I'm handing over to you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Nico. I'm just checking if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much. Let me just for the invitation, and then thank you to the previous speakers. I'm in the company of giants here, so I've got to be careful what I say, because I really do read with interest some of the previous speakers' comments and notes that have been made in the last few years. In fact, as far back as 2018, I quoted Andries in a presentation I did with regard to the construction industry. So I'm talking to the experts, so I really have to be careful what I say. But my brief is really about the role of CASA, which is the Construction Alliance South Africa, and the state of the construction industry. Now, much has been said about the state of the construction industry, and I don't think the numbers speak for themselves. I'm going to be fairly brief on both events because I think there's been a lot of, certainly from my side, I want to prevent duplication. But thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and I hope I don't disappoint you all. So let's start off with the issue of the role of CASA. The Construction Alliance South Africa is a product of a collected effort that started way back during the time of the dark days of lockdown, where six parties came in discussion, and we thought this is an opportunity for us to try and find some cohesion and collaborative effort to get the construction industry to talk to one voice. We then launched the official CASA way after the Rapid Response Task Team was created. And at that time, the Rapid Response Task Team was created specifically to unlock the construction industry. You will recall that in those days with the level 4 lockdown and level 5 and 4 lockdown, there was no activity in the construction industry, and it was only the civil engineering that came was opened at the time, with certain confusion with regard to the construction industry. Is it construction? Is it civil? Is it public contracts? Is it private contracts? But to cut the long story short, we did manage to actually lift the construction industry one level, and it was unlocked at the time much earlier than was anticipated. However, in saying that, we then felt as a body that this is perhaps an opportunity to look at all our institutions and then try and find a common voice within the construction industry. Every time we talk about the construction industry, we talk about unlocking the industry through the construction industry because it is a huge contributor towards the labor component and the GDP of our country. It's always easier said than done. And with a lot of hard work, in January this year, we launched the CASA under the new banner, the Construction Alliance, with 29 bodies. And currently they consist of 32 organizations and various associations that try to speak with one voice to government and to various other institutions to obviously make the industry a better place to be in and for the greater good of the country. The body was formally constituted with a genuine and cooperative engagement through open and transparent dialogue. Now that sounds very, very easy. Rest assured that it is not easy at all to be able to have a cooperative engagement through open and transparent dialogue, because as you can imagine, a family of 4 people already has constant conflict and issues of diversity, and where you have a body of 32 organizations, you're certainly going to have conflict. I think our main objectives is the formation of CASA magnifies the scale of the efforts and really a yearning for the solutions that we face. We keep on talking about these solutions and we do not face the challenges, or we keep on facing the challenges without positive solutions being presented. We did that in the times of lockdown, presenting alternative solutions to government. It wasn't our intention to say to government that this is what you must do, but these are proposals or recommendations coming from the industry at large, and possibly consider them and have a look at whether you cannot use that as some kind of guideline. I fully agree with Andries was saying earlier on. We certainly face many challenges, and perhaps the main challenge at the moment is the challenge of delivery. We have BEE challenges, which we know about, the BEE targets, unsustainable Black economic empowerment targets. We have a shortage of skills. These were all mentioned before, and lots of other challenges that the industry faced as a common challenge, not just in the construction industry, but certainly through our entire economy. We engage with Dr. Ramakgoba and his team, and that certainly does assist from our perspective to know that we are being heard at the top level. We're not always being, I suppose, implemented. Our proposals are not always being implemented, but that's the nature of the game. I think it's for us to lobby and to make sure that we are heard as an industry body. We talk about the building of a transformed and competitive sector, ensuring professionalism, fair competition, and ethical business practices. Even this meeting started out with the concept of ethical practices and the issue of collusion. And I think that's what we must at all times guard against and try and adhere to ethical business practices. As CASA, we aim to unify and amplify the voice of the construction industry. Very, very important. I think if we do not amplify the voice of the construction industry, we do have a challenge, because I think it isn't just becomes another industry without any vision. And that's lacking at the moment throughout our entire economy, is the lack of vision and unification. So we also attempt to have a common vision with the private and public sector, and that should be a commitment to jobs and transparency in business. I don't think I need to say much more on that. Are we united is always a question that gets asked, and my answer to that is yes, we are, in terms of our common goals as laid out in our memorandum of understanding. But I think we must be perfectly honest with ourselves and say, no, we are not united in terms of our positions on various issues. It would be impossible to be united on the various issues, but we have to agree that open dialogue and engagement needs to happen to anchor ourselves to that common goal. I don't think we must fool ourselves to think that the establishment of a body consisting of 33 associations and various other bodies would suddenly be a united body. It is impossible. And I don't for 1 minute think we should do that, because we would be naive. However, in saying that, I do think we need a body of this nature to have robust, open dialogue, and with the greatest respect for each other, so that we do find some common goal and some common vision in order to take our economy forward. In fact, I should say, in order to take our struggling economy forward. So that's pretty much where we are in terms of our vision and our rollout in terms of CASA. My second brief was then to talk about the state of the construction industry. Now, in 2018, I had a presentation to AMSA on the platform of Andries' comments at the time with regard to where the economy is. And we all agreed in 2018 it was bad enough already. And in those days, we were concentrating our efforts on non-payment by government to contractors. There were many companies that were being liquidated, etc. And we then predicted that unless we have intervention by the government in terms of bringing projects to the fore, we will fail. In the meantime, we had COVID hit us, and in fact, it was almost as if it was a freeze on everything that happened. And where we are at the moment is certainly, I think, that we've gone backwards. But backwards, hopefully, with a little bit of a hope, which I think we need to attack through that common goal that I've been talking about. Industry Insight claims at the moment that the current level of infrastructure spend is around 7.1%, but this should be at least 10% if we want to boost our economy. Spend was at 8.5% prior to COVID, and in fact, at the moment there's been a decline. And this has been since 2014. A previous speaker quoted about some of the figures in terms of the mining industry since 2008. And it's probably correct in saying that certainly our economy as a whole has been going downwards instead of even stabilizing or even increasing. I think it's expected that the building industry will bear the brunt of the decline. I think we've done that already. And as I said, it's 2014, the infrastructure has been consistently declining. This is where the challenge is. The talk of infrastructure spend does not match the reality. Everywhere we go and everything we hear from government is about spend, positive spend and positive infrastructure spend. However, our latest budget even shows the decline in infrastructure spending as opposed to an increase. And this does not bode well for our medium to long-term prospects. We will continue to be in this hiatus unless we start converting the talk to deeds. And that is the key in our economy at the moment. We fail to understand that every time our president speaks, he speaks about how much money is being allocated to infrastructure spend. But we never or very seldom get to hear about how much money has actually been spent in terms of infrastructure. And that to me is the biggest concern. Talk doesn't put bread on the table. It does nothing but create hope. But if we don't convert the hope to reality, we will have serious challenges going forward in our country. As I've said, despite the major talks of major spend, there have been no signs in the public spending for the economy. David Metterkamp of the Industries Insight sums up civil engineering up by 11%, but none of it related to major infrastructure projects promoted by the government. Construction will bounce back, but there are issues around capacity and managing due to lack of skills. Andries mentioned that not a few minutes ago. It was exactly what he's saying. We do have a concern with our skills, and perhaps that's his presentation on its own. So in summary, where are we? In my personal opinion, I think we are at the stage where the talk must be transformed to deed. The government must make a concerted effort to get the project going. Edward West calls it implementation paralysis. And that is a concern. We're moving nowhere. We talk about it. We talk about another 800 billion a year, and we've got this solidarity fund and all sorts of funds that we create. And we do not talk about what we have actually done and how we have spent the money to prove that we've converted words to action. We have a ticking time bomb. We spoke for years about youth unemployment. At the moment, it's not about youth unemployment. It's plain and simple about unemployment. We talk about unrest. We talk about projects being stopped because people are saying we don't have jobs. There's the construction mafia, which has gone quiet for a while, but it's still in the background. There's still noises about it, and it is still prevailing in some places, very subtly, but it's still there. And every time, and I have personal experience of it, every time you start a project, suddenly it appears we want jobs. Where do we get the jobs? Why aren't we given jobs, etc.? And that is the reality of the matter that we have to deal with at the moment. And lastly, I've thrown this comment in, and it was raised right at the beginning of the whole presentation that we've done. Eskom. It continues to be a thorn in the proverbial flesh of the industry. We cannot build on a platform which does not support growth, but creates uncertainty actually of investment. It will continue to do so. We will not get foreign investment. We will not get major infrastructure investment into the economy unless we know for certain that we do have capacity to grow the economy, and that would include the supply of our electricity. Nico, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm welcome to take any questions at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Any comments, any questions? Doesn't look like it, John, but I think it gave a very forceful, strong presentation. Thanks for that. Yeah, there's a hand. I can't see who it is. Sorry.
Hey, Nick, it's Roger, yeah?
Oh, Roger, sorry. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so listen, I just wanted to make the comment that appreciate the presentations and you know, one comment to make is that there is always this lots of talk about different issues, you know, lots of projects, etc., etc. I think one critical difference that we're starting to see at the moment is the Investment and Infrastructure Office of the President getting involved in a lot of discussions. You know, Andries mentioned it as an example, and we're also seeing the Operation Vulindlela team, which obviously incorporates the presidency and Treasury in unblocking, particularly at the infrastructural level, some of the issues that can be unblocked by putting pressure on the departments and trying to get the departments that don't have the capacity to do a bit further work. So just to say to you, I think absolutely it's an important step. We've been in all our engagements with government have been saying, listen, the criticality of having nice chats about things is nice, but this has got to be rubber hitting the tarmac. You want to get this economy going, you've got to unblock things at a practical level. And so just wanted to say to you, I mean, when we look at mining licenses or water use licenses or even self-gen projects, we haven't gone back to government and talked about high-level stuff. We've gone back in with actual practical projects. So we've taken, for example, the Goldfields solar project, the 40 megawatt solar project, and we've gone in and we've said, you know, here is the Eskom part of the equation, which is how long it takes, 210 days to get the Eskom grid tie connection authorization if you've got everything right. And we've done it at a practical level because that's one of the best ways of achieving the results. So just to supplement the comments from the two previous speakers, that we're starting to see a bit more traction on the issue that it's got to be practical, functional, hitting the tarmac instead of having nice chats about things, because we're very good at chatting. We're not as a country as good as in terms of implementing, but we're trying to make a big change on that particular issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Roger. Any other comments or questions? Right. Thanks. I think we're running well on time. I think our last speaker is Tiens Kotza, and why we squashed him in at the end. And Tiens, I think, he's not in South Africa. He's in Dubai or wherever. And I think Barry Pierce asked a good question, and that's why I squashed him in at the end. Is this whole thing about what do you call it, certification of work? Because I mean, some of our other stuff is SABS, and these places have fallen apart and not operating. So Tiens, I'm handing over to you, and thank you very much for connecting from overseas. Thanks.
No, great. Thank you very much, Nico, and thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all the speakers that came up before me. I would like to introduce BSI, and I've only got a few minutes, and I will try to do it as effectively and quickly as possible. BSI is, of course, the British Standards Institution. So we span the world. We are similar in structure and original ideas, I guess, as SABS and South African National Standards. But we have about 50 offices in the world. My responsibility is for Middle East, Turkey, India, and Africa. So in India, we've got 12 offices that I'm responsible for. And in 2015, we acquired the PricewaterhouseCoopers business, the financial auditing company's business in South Africa. And the reason for that was they were no longer allowed to conduct financial audits and other certification. So we acquired the business with 3 people and a handful of clients. And today the business employs about 35 people and about 30 external consultants that we use to do audits and training, etc. We've also delved into the BBEE part, so unfortunately it was a struggle to explain to an English board what BBE is for, and then to sell 27% of the company and understand that. But we are now a level 4 BBE compliant company in South Africa. In order for us to operate, especially in the mining sector, was what the mining charter and those requirements, although not legal requirements, was one of the driving parts. So we have a trust as a charity, and the charity support a charity called Rays of Hope that operates in the Johannesburg area. So maybe just in terms of BSI, we are a Royal Charter company. A Royal Charter company means we do not distribute profits. The Royal Charter was granted by Queen Victoria, actually in 1901. So the BBC is a Royal Charter company. So we make profit, we publish financial statements, etc. And luckily, we do not have to distribute that profit to a shareholder. So we're fairly independent and actually very nice to work for BSI because all the profits are reinvestments and for expansions and acquisitions like we did in South Africa. And obviously, it's our understanding that we require some support now for our South African business. So we bring to you, I don't want to say a replacement for South African Bureau of Standards, but we bring to you testing, certification, in some kind of inspection to some degree, and then obviously training. We operate in the beginning on tracks and trams. There was actually 70 different gauge sizes in the UK, and that's where it started. Reducing that to 5 was the initial job of BSI. And just in terms of the future part, from T standards and now actually kite marking T and genetically identifying T and then marking it as T of origin, those are the type of things that we do. And then in the fastest growing standard is information security. So in the information security area, possibly most of our work is currently in that field where people steal information, they're not resilient enough, the systems don't work, etc. In terms of the newer stuff, connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, we are quite involved in that, writing the standards for that, because you can't just start making autonomous connected vehicles. You need standards to comply to, and standards drive that creativity. We're obviously involved in robotics and artificial intelligence, and then in the construction industry, obviously building information modeling is that part where you build a building according to a set of blueprints that is able to later support the maintenance and later the asset management, the energy management, etc. So that is some of the new standards. And then obviously maybe the Internet of Things. Everybody is talking about the Internet of Things, but we test in our laboratory a lot of devices according to the standard for the Internet of Things. And we find that even the medical devices that we test, which are infusion pumps, tend to fail even the basic tests. We tested infusion pumps, which are the pumps that counts the drops that drips into your vein. And mostly when we go and test those things, they are easily hackable and easily accessible and easily changeable, etc. So that is part of the areas that we cover. You might or might not know that BSI actually originated the quality management system, the BS 7570 in 1979, which later became ISO 9000, all the derivatives after that, and so forth for environmental management, occupational health and safety, information security, business continuity, and organizational resilience. We started this organizational resilience part in 2014, not knowing that there will be a worldwide crisis. And organizational resilience is actually interesting, and you spoke about a lot this morning about ESCOM, etc. In the UAE, the ruler of the UAE is driving something called public sector resilience, which if you do not have public sector resilience, the organizations operating within your economy couldn't really deal with organizational resilience very well. So public sector resilience is roads that are sustainable and resilient, power supply that never breaks down, water supply that never breaks down. And the UAE is very close to actually accomplishing that. And then obviously kite mark is the ultimate symbol of testing and certification that we issue. For example, fire extinguishers could be certified to CE mark, which means you can sell it in Europe, but it does not mean the extinguisher can actually put out a fire of a certain size. So the performance criteria, it's actually a performance mark. So performance criteria also had to be met. I just want to quickly run through we are quite heavily invested in construction products, doors, testing of steel, cement. We do test cement and we issue kite marks. So we provide market access. So in a country like South Africa, if you wish to export your products, we can actually certify that and give you the export license in terms of what is required for the product quality and the product durability, etc. In the medical device business, we are possibly number 2 in the world on medical devices. That's from active implantable medical devices that we certify for sale in Europe and in the US for FDA approval, etc. And that's all actually, strangely enough, in South Africa, there are quite a very clever number of companies that make hip joints and knee joints, etc., that we certify for export to Europe and to America, etc. And the active implantable devices, highest level of devices, which are things like mechanical animal combined heart valves and stents, etc. So we employ about 300 people in the medical device field that does the technical file review and issue the certification for that. I just want to swiftly move along to organizational resilience once again. We've published quite a number of publications on organizational resilience that you might find of interest, especially on how to deal with some of the issues you've raised in South Africa and how to benchmark that and how to understand where your industry or your company is and what you can do to improve that. The buzzword in organizational resilience is your ability to bounce back. The new phrase is your ability to bounce forward. We advocate a bounce forward step. So you have to improve every time you hit a crisis and every time. You can't go just bounce back, you have to bounce forward. And those are the concepts linked to that. As I said, in terms of the responsibility, we believe in BSI, we've done more for the environment just through ISO 14000 and the standards that came after that, where companies, you can talk a lot about environment, but unless a company actually implements it and reduce the emissions and reduce that, nothing really moves forward in the world. And you can understand that. In terms of the whole series of occupational health and safety, we were instrumental into writing those standards and doing that. In terms of the innovation part, now we are on a different level where we do artificial intelligence. In terms of health and safety and artificial intelligence, the latest words on those are predictive analytics. So where you have indicators, leading indicators that indicate when you will have an accident, etc. So where you analyze a large number of parameters and you can then indicate or predict the next accident and where it would happen. And those things are all in the new artificial intelligence innovation scope of what we do. And then obviously I spoke about resilience and the framework and what is available within the resilience framework. Then obviously BSI provides training courses and a whole suite of other things. And earlier you did discuss the COVID-19 response. There is a guideline called ASPASA 45005, which we wrote actually internally as an internal document for BSI and then later made it an ISO standard. So for those of you who still do not have a comparative standard to measure yourself in this pandemic, that could give you some guideline. And that is also downloadable from our website. The same with the organizational resilience part is uploadable from our website. So there is a video which I'm not going to play, which sits over here. And I thought that you will have access to the deck and you can watch the video. And I assume my time would be up. If there's any questions, please let me know. And thank you very much for your interest. A short introduction to BSI, but we are now in South Africa, and being a South African for years, I tried to open an office in South Africa, and then obviously at some point they had to give in when we made the acquisition. So we are happy to be in South Africa. We will be happy to support the industry. In the mining industry, we do have the clients that the BS Petro Mining Group are our clients, and we do work for them. And then obviously we also do work for Anglo, Platinum, etc. So thank you very much for listening to my part. If there's any questions, we will make the presentation available, and a lot of information is on our website. Our office is in Menlyn Main in Pretoria. So there's a whole team of 30 people to assist you should you need any assistance and help with what we do or what you might require. So thank you very much. Nico, it's back to you.
Thanks, Tiens. I don't know if there's somebody who wants to make a comment, ask a quick question. Put your hand up. I've just seen a face that I asked about this morning. I see Jim O'Brien. He's from Ireland. He's in. We've got our friend from Spain. He's in. So welcome. And we've got Tiens from Abu Dhabi, wherever. So we've really got a connected worldwide group. So thanks for that. Unless there's any comments, questions, or something to that effect, I think we've done well. We've stopped before the time that we plan to stop. I think what we're going to ask the presenters is maybe just to drop us the talks. We'll also put them on the YouTube, and also I'll ask Anneke to put them on our website if you don't have a problem with us marketing you. So thank you very, very much, everybody. And yeah, have a great week and a great day further. And thank you very, very much.
Sorry, Nico, to be so late.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you.
Jim, nice to meet you from
Great
Barcelona.
to see you.
Bye.
Take care.
Very interesting meeting. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the speakers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.